And I'm gonna be high.
Good on you, Donald. I'm the Rocket Man. Yeah.
I'm a rocket man. And I'm gonna be
Rocket Man.
I'm a rocket man. I wanna go to the moon.
Busy and great the same. Been traveling all over the country. Uh Funny thing, I've been down in Charleston, South Carolina, at the Isle of Palms all week. And we were down there with the state leaders of South Carolina. And I have some cool stuff to share with you. At least one I want to share later. But that's my most recent trip. Before that, I was uh, up at Averett in Tennessee, visiting those fine folks. Before that, I was in South Africa. Man, I've been globe trotting. I think the Globetrotters want me to come be their mascot. So we'll see.
Yeah, and you've just been doing all that while being
Yeah,
president
man.
of
I'm
Reconex,
gonna
just
tell you
killing the
what.
scene.
It sounds like, when people see you out there, and I always refer to myself as preaching the gospel, right? Meaning cutting the BS out of logistics and
Yeah.
freight and telling people the way the cow eats the cabbage, right? And so the only way I can do that is I have a tremendous support staff. We got the best operations people, the best tech people, solutions. I mean, I tell you, I refer to it a lot of times as over my career, I come in contact with people for reasons, and I call them the island of misfit toys. That's what we call ourselves at Reconex. Because if you remember that cartoon at Christmas time, that's funny, we're coming up on Christmas time. It's all the people that thought they had problems, but they had so much greatness outside of one little thing. And when you put those people together, buddy, and you're doing it for the right reasons because you want to get up and you want to help people and you want to change the game and make a difference in this industry, and the money or anything that's paid is a byproduct of that good work, man, it's amazing. So that's the only way I can do this is get out or do this or talk with you. That's the only way you can do it, I'm sure, too, is the team you've got around you.
Yeah. Amen. Hey, on one, I echo that. Two, the way that you speak and can use analogies and it's the most. I've met a lot of people in logistics. You're one of the most sincere
Oh,
people
man,
I
you
know,
gonna make
and
me
I
blush. I'm
don't know
already
if
a
it's
red guy. Turn red.
purposeful humor. I don't know if it's purposeful humor or if you just exude that, but you always have like how the cow eats the cabbage. Never heard that. I'm going to use it now. And so, to the people listening to this, if you ever hear me say something clever, I probably heard it from Todd Fain first, and I did not give any credit, but he's okay.
You so funny, man. Listen, I'm telling you, the funny thing that you said about that, and listen, I've picked up all these nuggets, meeting people. We just hear things and always become a student. But a lot of times I get asked, and it's funny because people that work with me day in and day out, they know this is the truth. People ask all the time, is
Yeah.
Todd like this all the time? Does he act like this? Is that just a show? Is that his accent? Is that his real accent? Does he practice any of this? And the answer they will always tell you is that's Todd. That's who he is 24/7. And when I'm saying all that, I'm not saying that's the way you're supposed to be. I'm just different than a lot of people. So I'm not saying you should be like me. I'm saying as much as I've been
I'm
blessed in
saying that.
life and the people that's been put in my life, buddy, I'm the low bar. If you see what I'm doing and who I am, everybody else in the whole world can go up, up, up. And that's what I'm trying to explain to them. And as I started looking, Gabe, across this industry, and I hadn't been on LinkedIn a long time. I know you've been on LinkedIn, and man, you're a big dude, and I love you, and I'd love to talk more about you too. So don't make this about me. When you look across LinkedIn, you see all these freight experts now. I mean, experts I'd
So
never
many.
even heard of before. And maybe I'm not a lot, but I'm kind of at that age now. I'm about half a century old. I'm at that age where I'm too old. All the young people call old, but all the old people call young. So I'm like in the best decade right now for the next 10
Yeah.
years. But I started looking at all the experts on LinkedIn. And what I really figured out real fast in a hurry is all the experts weren't even posting on LinkedIn. That is not a push or some smoke on anybody out there that's the freight experts, because I know everybody knows a lot. But the industry was founded by people I never met, but I've learned from many, many people that are true experts. And then I figured out the true experts either didn't want to get on the platform or they were too damn busy to be doing it. And that's why people, you get on LinkedIn, it's about AI. We'll do it for
Yeah.
you. We'll do it for you. That's the worst thing anybody can ever do. If you're not
Yeah.
going to do it yourself and it's not going to come for you and you don't have the time to do it, then stay off of it. If you're not going to bring value,
Yeah, don't do
bring free value. That's what we're about. Is you go to my LinkedIn page, no bullshit. I'm just going to tell you the way it is. If I don't know the answer, I know a lot of people, including you and hundreds of experts that's not on LinkedIn. I'll tie you into them just like that.
Yeah. Well, and I think you brought up a good point. I think it's fair to say that most people who post on LinkedIn don't actually do the thing they're posting about. That's not
Right.
just for
Agree.
freight, right? That's of
Yes,
all
100%.
industries. Most people are posting about how to do something, but they have never actually done it. And one of the reasons, there are many, one of the reasons I'm having the Let's Talk Logistics podcast is that I actually do run a business and we have 30 employees and we're moving freight all the time. And I also post about it, but there's not very many people that are in a leadership position at a company that are actually posting about business, about hiring, firing, HR,
Right.
investments, VC, private equity, all of that stuff. And most of the people who are posting either haven't done it, or the ones who are doing it, they're probably afraid to talk about the actual hard stuff
Right.
about doing it. And I said, enough with that. I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs who have sold their business come back and, start a podcast and say, hey, I'm going to tell you all the things that were very difficult for those young entrepreneurs out there, but no one's really doing it well. Building in public is not actually a real thing. No one actually says what happened wrong or what went wrong. It's only, yes, we finally raised that round or we got this customer. It's not, oh, I had to fire somebody that I liked.
Right.
What?
Right.
Nobody talks about it. And the industry, another reason I started this podcast to bring on people like you is that the industry, there's all kinds of stories from the industry that deserve to be told, but maybe people aren't comfortable telling them because, they shouldn't say it or they shouldn't use names, whatever it is. But I do think that the industry would be a bit better place if it was more transparent, if some of the stories that are told at the conferences were a bit more out in the open without any repercussion. Nobody can cancel my show. I'm not sponsored by anybody.
And so the viewers know nobody's getting paid 1 cent for anything we're saying or talking about right now.
Yeah, we're just two dudes talking and I'm just learning from Todd Fain. So, Todd, I think it'd be helpful. One of the things I won't do in this podcast is do like a big intro, like, hey, today, let's talk logistics episode 11,000 or number 1. I'm just going to have conversations and post them. But one of the things I think would be helpful is you to give like a 2-minute, summary of how you ended up as president of Reconex. That's your current title. But you do have just a bit of gray in the beard. So you must have done something else besides that. And we have to talk about the beard. I've known you for a couple of years now. This is the first couple of months I've ever seen you with a beard. And you can never shave it. You have to keep it. I'm sorry.
Buddy.
So take me through. You were at Transportation Insights. You've done everything. You built the industry up. You tore it down, and now you're the president of Reconex. You can talk a bit about Reconex and what you guys do there too. But how'd you get there? And
thank you for that. And I hope you're gonna have somebody edit some of this because if I go over 2 minutes, I can't leave out certain things. But I promise I won't be long. And plus, hopefully, I tell you enough that you invite me back again, right? Because I think eventually you're going to be so big, you may need a sub co-host or somebody like, remember Regis and Kathy and all that, and Philbin and all these people?
I don't
you
remember
don't,
Regis
but I
and
do.
Kathy,
But whatever
but
they are today, you know
dating
what I'm
myself.
saying. So, well, let me tell you a little bit about
I
that.
do.
You packaged up a lot of different things, which, funny enough, they're all tied together. So I'm going to tell you a couple of things. So before we get started on that, talking about LinkedIn and how you're not going to do, I think I have dreamed of someone doing a podcast in the fashion that you're doing this one, where you just get on, you talk about real stuff and you just let it go. And look, I'm not saying I know it all or you know it all, but there's a lot of people we know. And I'm going to mention a couple of those during this. And so if you think about how I got to Reconex, I think it bears fruit. And I won't go into a lot of detail to know where I came from. Okay. So a lot of times people think I make a lot of this stuff on, but I got plenty of validators around me. And so, many of them. And so all I do is speak the truth. Many people think I'm funny and I want to be a comedian, but I will tell you, all I care about is making people smile and making them happy and doing the right thing, right? And I think if that's your focus, the other stuff will come. And so, in order to know where I got to, you got to know where I started. So I was born in Spartanburg County of South Carolina. I still live in South Carolina today, but I've been in the industry now for 32 years. And I was born in a little town called Fingerville, South Carolina. It was founded by Joseph Finger. When we were growing up, we used to say it was finger nasty. And anything that I'm talking about with me, I'm never going to use names because I'm going to protect the guilty and the innocent. Okay. But I grew up in that town, and I would tell you, it's the wrong side of the tracks, but I grew up in South Carolina's foster care system. So when I was a little baby, and look, I'm just going to talk like you and I are talking. Y'all can choose not to share some of this or not. I get real excited when you were talking about your
Go for it,
adoption,
man.
because I didn't get adopted as a kid. I went through different families. Nobody ever legally adopted me. But back in the 70s, and I can only imagine the way it is now, Gabe, because it's way worse now than it was, and it was bad then. Okay. When you come up through the foster care system, it was almost like Cinderella would have been a great version of it, but it was like you're the hired help. And you would go through different families, and it would be white families, it would be poor families, it'd be black families, it would be you got moved around with everybody. And real bad shit happens to kids, boys and girls, that never should ever happen to anybody. And that's why I care about now, is because I see where the world's going. I can only imagine what people are doing with kids now, and it just blows my mind. So I got shuffled around through different families, right? And so I come up through high school, and I was a football player. I was funny story. I was 6 foot. They listed me in as 6'1" in the programs. I went to the doctor the other day and they told me I'm 5'9", but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And I think the beard, I'm turning into a troll under a bridge. So anyway, it's pulling me down. So back to, as we went through the different families, I come up through high school, but as I grew up, majority of my time was spent with social workers and police officers. And I love them both because I had good ones. And in my mind, and my whole purpose in life was to be a police officer. Believe it or not, that was my dream, because growing up dealing with them, man, I'm gonna tell you, they saved my life literally many times. And kids I know around, buddy, I can still hear exactly what those kids sounded like, what they said, and what I would hear. And LinkedIn's not the platform to get onto that. But when I go around and speak, I don't mind speaking about it because it needs to be out there. So as I grew up in high school, of course, being poor, I had nothing. I never had anything. Let me tell you this. When I was real little, I'd go down on the Packlet River and I would trap muskrats and sell them for their fur for a quarter. And then when I couldn't have enough quarters, I'd go up to the store up on the hill. And when nobody is looking, I'd sneak in at night. Because remember, I could go anywhere. I was in the woods most of the time when I wasn't in school. Nobody cared where I was. I just wanted to get away. And so I would feed myself and find something to eat. And people would say, "What'd you eat?" I'd eat persimmons. If you've never had a persimmon, eat a raw one. It'll make you. That's what I used to say to those girls that take their selfies when they do their lips up like they were drinking persimmon juice. Yeah.
You just ate a raw persimmon. Huh?
And so what happened is I'd go up there. Well, I'd start stealing Pepsi Colas out of the drink machines. You could stick your hand up in as a kid and just pull them out and drink all you want. Well, over time, they got smart and they put a little metal cup on the bottom so you couldn't get your hand up in it. And then they started putting the dollar machine, the dollars back. I remember the first dollars, Gabe, there was no internet and stuff back then when I'm talking. You put the dollar in. Well, me and a buddy of mine figured out that you could take a dollar and put clear tape on it, put the dollar in right when the lights hit, jerk it out, and it'd still give you a Pepsi. So I grew up running stuff like that. Funny thing about it, I was in everything. It was like Forrest Gump. And so when I got out of high school, I was actually, let me tell you how stupid I was. I was actually offered a football scholarship to play center for North Greenville University. Okay. I didn't have any male or female leaders in my life. And so I was on my own. I was an adult at a very young age. And in my infinite wisdom, I told North Greenville University that I'm a defensive end. I went to Bowling Springs High School and we started the Steel Curtain Award. It was me, Randy, and Fred. Okay. I tell you, we were best of the best. It was the first time we went to state and everything. Well, North Greenville said, we'll give you a college scholarship, but we need you to play center because you're not tall enough to play defensive end in college. And I looked at that cat square in the eye and I said, before I play center and come off a defense from ripping heads off, I'll go pay my own way through school. Well, that's how it started, Gabe. So then what I did is I started going around trying to find a job, any job. I've done it all. I've doffed cloth in cotton mills. I've picked peaches. I've painted houses. I've hung siding. I could take you through it all. Before I started doing that, I went around and was begging people for jobs. And right at the time, it was right in Greer. There's an industrial, and Rocket Express was there, and a lot of LTL carriers. I'll name LTL carriers y'all won't remember, but older people my age and older know them all. Hoyt Sagas owned that company, and so he was actually down in Atlanta, and Rocket bought Red Arrow, put them out of business, LTL carrier. So in order to pay my way through school, just Greenville Tech, nobody knows what that is. It's a little tech school, but I love it. I think that's where people get, you learn. I'm going to tell you something else. In the future, the highest paid job is going to be people who can get shit done with their hands and their brain. It's not going to be the AI. AI didn't do nothing when the hurricane come through here.
Let's put a pin in that. We'll go through that in the logistics industry in general too. I think that's a good topic.
We want to do it now because what's going to happen? I don't want to draw this out. You want to do it now? You want to talk about AI?
Yeah, let's go for it. So we'll put it. So I'm going to weave back to your childhood and how you ended up Rocket Express, not affiliated with Rocket Shipping, but maybe it is.
Not. It's not. It was called Rocket Express, and funny enough, it was RE, and it was orange. And I'm telling you, I'm going to blow your mind when I weave all this stuff together because as you come into it. So back then, you had to earn your way to load a truck. So when you was a young man, let me step back. I went in, how I got the job is I begged for a job, and you had to be OSHA certified back then and drive a forklift. But if you could drive a forklift, they'd pay you $8 an hour. Well, I wasn't OSHA certified, but I told them, if you take me out back, I can race anything with a motor in it and impress you like you've never seen because I love doing that. Well, what happened is they took me out there and started doing it. Well, of course, I got to be OSHA certified, but I begged them, if you'd let me do anything, just give me a job. I will be the best employee you ever had. I will make you more money. I will make you more proud than anybody, and I won't ever let you down. And I've said that my whole career. So that's a pinnacle of who I am, of what I want people to know, that if they would get inside them and that's the way they would approach things, sky's the limit. Your whole world will be your oyster. And so they gave me a job, but I had to hand load and unload all the floor stack stuff for the line hauls at night. Long story short, I worked my way up through the next 2 years from loading trucks at night to getting a pallet jack to getting a forklift heister. Buddy, I can flip coins with the forks with the best of them. I did OS&D. I did international. I did dispatch. I did line haul. I did local PU&D. Wow. I got into trucks and drove them. I went and got the 18-wheelers. I know how to back them up. I didn't have my CDLs. Wasn't nobody supposed to know back then because I was trying to build something. So what happened is, that happened. I was doing that. When it come time to graduate, you're guaranteed a job on the police department for $12,500 a year. During that,
graduate college, you mean, or
graduate from college? Okay. $12,500 a year to be a police officer in Greenville, South Carolina, back around 1992. Okay. Well, what happened then at the same time, because I'd worked my way up, they had come to me and said, hey, because we had taken tests. I was smarter than the average bear. God, just thankful to God, because I'm not that smart a guy. I'm not that smart a guy. I met a lot of smart people.
He is.
Right?
He is.
And so what happened then is they come to me and said, and it wasn't called pricing back then, it's called traffic. We were dispatching off of Q cards and CBs. We can talk about all that stuff. That's why I said we're going to have about 10 shows, Gabe. And we were doing all of that.
Hey, there's no time limits on this podcast. So we
were doing that. And then they come to me, and I was running traffic at the time, so understanding LTL pricing, and they offered me a terminal manager job for $32,500. Buddy, back then, I thought I'd hit the lottery. I was happy because you don't understand, Gabe. I was poor growing up. Bro, I was so poor
All the way.
that on Christmas morning, when I came downstairs, if I didn't have a Woody, I didn't have nothing to play with. That's what kind of poor you get at Christmas. Okay. Poor like you wrap some boxes up just to feel better or not be embarrassed. Poor where you never had friends come over because you ashamed, embarrassed, and want people to find out. And so I always told myself, I'm just going to be a regular guy my whole life, but I'm going to outwork everybody else. And so I took that terminal manager position, and I'm not going to walk you through all of them, but Rocket went out of business because they bought Forward Air, or not Forward Air, they bought Red Arrow, drug them into the red. Our terminal was the best of best, but at 5 o'clock one evening when I thought I was living the best of my life, the executives from Forward Air come in and said, we now own all your terminals, all your assets and everything like that. And oh, by the way, Todd, we already got a terminal manager here. So we're going to go ahead and tell you, you got about, which I love Forward Air for doing that time. They gave me 60 days to find a job. But I still worked for them. We had 2 terminal managers. I worked the whole time. And back then you had to use the newspaper. So then I got the newspaper out and I was looking around the want ads, and there was a company said, hey, they're looking for a salesperson in Greenville or Spartanburg, South Carolina in logistics. Well, all this 3PM stuff was still new back then, right? So I sent my resume in. It took 2 weeks. They called me on the landline. They said, we're going to be down there at the Marriott in Greenville, South Carolina doing interviews. And so I'm like, sign me up because I'm going to need a job. So I go into this interview, and it was Logistics Management Incorporated, and it was founded and owned by Ray Koval, one of the nicest, sweetest. Everybody that I come in contact was with for a reason, and I believe we still do this today. I believe every time you meet somebody in your life, there's a reason why you're meeting them. Many of us will go through life with our blinders on, and you'll have other opportunities if you don't pay attention, but there's always a reason why if you search for it. And so Ray Koval was the nicest man. I remember I interviewed down here, and this is funny. Paul Foran was another good friend of mine. I met him. He was Ray's son-in-law. That's who I was interviewing. And, in Massachusetts, and I know I sound country, but I used to sound a whole lot more country, Gabe, than I do now, back in the old days, because I'm traveled country now. I hear all the dialects for many years.
Yeah.
I've done it all. So I go up. So they come down and they said, hey, so we go through, and you got to remember at this point in my life, I'd never been in sales. A lot of people always think Todd's a sales guy. He's a sales guy. And I'll tell you about that because we've made a lot of money for people. And I'll tell you something that somebody told me a long time ago, and it's the truth. Always remember this, Gabe. It's not how much money you make. It's how much money you spend. Okay. Just think on that for a little bit. And running a business isn't that hard. Running a business is how much money you make, how much money you spend, and what's left over. The hard part is making sure you make the right decisions with all of that. And we can get to that too. And so what happened is I interviewed, and Paul's got this gruff Massachusetts accent. I love the Massachusetts accents. And I think I get along with people with strong accents because we can't understand each other, and we just laugh and smile and have a good time. And so what happened is I met him, we're going through it, and it's on my LinkedIn, and it's not. And I want people to know when I was growing up, people used all kind of words and all kind of things, and they made fun of everybody. And it seemed like when I was growing up, everybody kind of understood people's intentions. Okay. It wasn't about the word. It was just your intentions. And so many of us are referred to as rednecks down in South Carolina for many years. And if that's offensive, I'm sorry, but it's not offensive to me. I've been called a whole lot worse. And so what happened?
Hey, I'm up from northern Minnesota, and we were called rednecks as well. So I guess
buddy,
it's just
here's another pin to put in it that people need to know. People need to not get upset about things and understand the true intentions. And I'm going to tell you, not just say, well, you're telling me that. How do you do it? I'm going to tell you how I do it. There's nothing you can say, call, or do to me, Gabe. Nothing. Take my worst enemy. Maybe it's my ex-wife. I don't know, but take my worst enemy. The worst they can say about me, maybe just be 2 to 3% of the worst that I notice in me. So before you get offended or before people start getting angry at each other and moving past peace and love, think about the 80 and 90% of the darkness and sin you have in your body, which I know I do. People don't even know a piece of that. So there's nothing you can call or do or make me upset about. So stick a pin in that one. We go into the
Yep.
meeting. Paul looks at me and says, "Well, I'm just going to be honest with you. I like you, but we need a good redneck down here, or we're not going to get the Frigidaire business." And I looked at him. I said, "My brother, I am your redneck. How much are we going to get paid to do this business? Because I'll sell, I'll do anything." And it was a new concept to me at the time because they were at what I refer to in today's terms, they were a carrier agent 3PL. And what a carrier, there's three kinds of
Okay.
3PLs, or most of the time. There's a
Yeah.
broker, and we know what brokers are. There's a shipper's agent, which you get paid by the shipper. The shipper's the only one paying you. But there's 3PLs I refer to as carrier agents where they get backside commissions from certain LTL carriers. Back then, it was said it was around 1%, but it was 7. I'm just telling you what it is. It's the truth. Remember, this is the raw
Rebates,
7%
right? You're
rebate.
talking like,
So
hey, booked
basically,
revenue
any
rebates.
freight that 3PL at the time, LMI is a good business. I thought it was a cool business model. I never heard of that before at the time because it was something new. Those guys started from
Yeah.
Red Ball Motor Lines up here. You can look that stuff up. And so they were big in the Northeast, but they didn't have representation in the South or Texas or anywhere. So they were big in the Northeast. And so it was kind of unique business
Yeah.
model. And they said, whatever we save people, they get the savings and all the savings, but the carrier's paying the backside commission, 7% on the total freight spend. So if you gave $10 million to overnight at the time, you got 7% of 10 million. The shipper was saving money. And back then there wasn't TMSs yet. We ain't getting into that. But that was,
Yeah. Well, just a quick, there are TMSs now that do the same thing as a carrier agent.
yes. Think about that.
So,
So,
I mean, there's TMSs out there that make money off of what booked revenue the carriers get, and they get that same type of rebate. And
well,
that's
it
just
is
an
an
interesting
interesting
thing.
thing. And this
TMS
is
is
what,
here, but it's the
it's the
same
same business. It's
business.
going to fire people up because obviously I left there and I love the people. So anytime I'm referring to business models, the disclaimers you need to put out there is not a reflection of the people. I have good friends in all these places, people way better than me. So I'm just telling you
Yeah.
my experience. And so
I doubt that, but go on.
so as we got into it, and I went up to Ray Koval. They flew me up to Massachusetts, and I went in there, and he had this beautiful, clear sculpture of a woman at the time, and it wasn't a naked woman, but it was like a Greek lady, but it was clear. And I was just so mesmerized as a young man. I'd never seen anything like this before. I came from nothing, right? I'd never seen this stuff. This was fancy shit, buddy. I went up and I just put my hands on that thing and I started rubbing it down. And Ray looked at me, and they had not hired me yet. Okay, this was the final. They liked me here. They had not hired me. And I rubbed it, and I looked at him, and I said, "Buddy, I love this statue. One day when I'm rich like you, I'm gonna have one just like it." I don't, but that's what I thought at the time.
Is this what you're gonna pan
Yeah,
your camera
'cause,
to your
I don't
background? You
have
got that
one. I got a
statue back
little
there?
stuffed Chucky woodchuck back there. You can see. So,
Oh,
as I
man.
finished saying that, his eyes was big as saucers. I got another Spud Webb story. I was with Spud Webb, the basketball player. His eyes big as saucer. That's another one. Remember that one. He was looking
I'll
big as
remember.
saucers, and he said, "You're not supposed to touch it because fingerprints and hand oils ruin it." And at the time, it was like a $20,000 statue, and that's a lot of money. Remember what I was getting
Oh,
paid?
no.
And I was like, "Oh shit, I have not going to get this job." Well, they ended up hiring me, and he didn't hold that against me. And I loved that company, and I loved it. And as we continued to grow in that company, I started the Southeast sales. We opened offices in Texas, California. We were catting it up through there. Well, during that sometime, Ray had a best friend, Nelson was his name, who was the CFO they had started that company together. And Nelson passed away. And when Nelson passed away, Ray wasn't in it anymore. And I understood that at the point, and I understand it even more now. So they ended up selling that company to Prime Advantage, who I don't know if they knew what they were doing or not. There's good people I met at Prime Advantage, but during the time, and I can say this because I don't think that company exists. Paul had told me, he said, "Hey, you might want to start looking for a job in the back of your mind, not in a hurry, but if there's something great out there." Well, at the time, fast forward a little bit, meeting with the carriers, there was a company called Dixie Trucking. I don't know if you ever heard of Dixie Trucking. It was a Southeast LTL carrier. I was talking to Ken Wall because we had put them into a shipper down there. And Ken Wall on the phone call
Okay.
said, "Let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard of a company called Transportation Insight?"
That one I've heard of, Todd. We're current.
Okay, we current. Well,
That one I've
I'm
heard
up to you now. All right.
All right.
So
Here
let
we
me
go.
tell you, you're gonna like this one. Have you heard Transportation Insight? I said, "No, man, I ain't never heard Transportation Insight. They must not be anybody because I'm out here. We selling all the deals." So
About it.
Ken Walls, the CFO of Dixie Trucking, he said, "Have you heard of Transportation Insight?" I said, "No, I never heard of them. Never run into them." "Have you heard of Paul Thompson?" "Never heard of that cat either." "I don't know who they are." He said, "You need to check them out." I said, "Why do I need to check them out?" He said, "We get a new client signed from them every day." I said, "Bullshit, buddy. Ain't nobody signing a 3PL client every day." "Oh," he said, "They are. We get one every day." I'm like, huh. So they were up in Charlotte. So I drive back down to Greenville, South Carolina. And first thing I do is get on the internet. Okay. Go to the website. Still good stuff back then. But, the websites wasn't like they are now. They were just kind of like a landing page. And on the top, I look, it said Transportation Insight, some old blue and gold stuff, trucking. And then I go down, Paul Thompson's the CEO and founder, D. Paul Thompson. He's listed twice or something. So I click on that thing and copy it and create an email. And I send him an email and say, "You don't know who I am, but I just met Ken Wall. And he was talking about you guys. You signing the deal every day. I thought I was the best in the business. I'd like to talk to you." But it
Oh, I
wasn't
love
10
that
or
email.
15 minutes. I bet Paul's probably still got it somewhere. It wasn't 10 or 15 minutes that he emailed me back and said, "Hey, I'm glad you reached out to me. Why don't you give me a call?" And he pasted his cell phone number in there. Well, I giddy up, baby. I don't let any grass grow under my feet. So I called him up. He answered the phone. He sounded a little bit like me, but he's from Arkansas. So they talk a little bit slower and they hunt pigs. I don't do those kind of things. So he calls me and he said, "This is kind of him. I'm going to do my Paul Thompson impression." "Hey, Todd, this is Paul Thompson." I said, "Hey, Paul, this is Todd Fain. How you doing?" "I'm doing good, and I hope you are too. I'm glad you reached out to me. I can't really share any proprietary information with you, but if you'd like to consider coming over here and joining the A team, I'd love to talk with you." And I started laughing. I said, "Well, first of all, and I'm a young guy. Don't hold this against me because if you
Yeah.
judge me looking, there's four fingers pointing back at you." I told him, "Well, first off, bud, you probably can't afford me. Second, I don't think you know who I am. I'm the best." I was like, "I'm the best damn sales guy in this industry at the time." I said,
You just
That's
didn't know
right.
that yet. You were
I
surprised he
was
didn't
knocking
know.
doors down. I
What could
didn't
he
know.
not
How
know?
didn't he know? I'm talking to him like, you're a young man, you full of piss and vinegar, you think you know everything, you don't know shit, you embarrassed about half the stuff as you get older. But my point is, this show's raw, and I'm not going to sugarcoat. I'm going to be honest. And so Paul started laughing. And he said, "No, no." He said, I've heard your name." He said, "That's why I'm talking to you. Why don't you come up to Hickory and see me?" So I go up to Hickory and I meet Paul, and they had just started Transportation Insight. It wasn't a year, it was months. They had just started. And Paul had bought Clay Hyder Truckload Company, CHTL, up in Hickory, North Carolina. And they had put Transportation Insight in a front of a old truckload company. I don't know if you ever seen an old trucking terminal, but it's wood panel. I'm talking about some 70s shit, Gabe. I mean, it was like dark,
Never seen
dingy.
that.
They wasn't about
No.
9 people there and about 8 people in the back. There was no sales employees because Paul was big on sales agents, and that's a big deal. Put a pin in that because that's where things get really good for you and a lot of
Amen.
other
Yeah.
people. So he had never had a sales employee. And so he and I started negotiating. And I said, at the time, just so you know, remember 325, when I was having this conversation with Paul Thompson, I was making $130,000 a year. Buddy, that's like $1
That's a
million
lot of
to
money,
a poor
Todd. That
guy.
was a
I'm
lot of
telling you, it's
money.
$1 million. And Paul looked at me and said, "Well, you come on as an agent, and I'm gonna pay you 30%." And I said, 30%. And so what I did, and Gabe, I'm gonna tell you, people are like, how's Todd so good? I'm not good. You can do it too. I got two things. I ain't got no quit in me, and I don't think I'm better than nobody else.
Yeah.
And I feel like if anybody else can do anything in the world, you can too, because I can. People say, well, you can't dunk a basketball like Michael Jordan. I said, hell yeah, I can. You give me a step ladder and a springboard, and I'll make you have a good time. It's all about the results. It's how you get there. So don't knock yourself down because you don't have
Yeah.
you don't have the abilities. There's other ways and tools to get you to be able to do the same thing as somebody else. And so he started talking to me, and so he said, well, 30%. Well, he went through, remember, I'm making 100 grand. I went through the deals I had sold and what I was getting paid at LMI. And no joke, buddy, it was 7 figures what my commission would be. And all of a sudden, that hit me, a poor old boy, and my first son, my first child was on the way. And that comes into play. And I was so excited, but he said, you'll be an agent. I was like, what's an agent? He said, I don't pay you anything. What do you mean you don't pay me nothing? I don't pay you anything. You got to go sell the deal, and I'll give you 30% once we start making money. I was like, well, how am I supposed to pay my bills? Well, do you have a little money? I ain't got no money, buddy. I spend every bit of it quick as I can make it.
How much? Not how much you make. How
That's
much you
right. So
spend.
I said, see what I'm telling you, you're going to see. So he said, well, let's talk it out. And we ended up talking it back and forth. And the linchpin was because my firstborn son was on the way, and my insurance back then, health insurance is terrible. That's a whole other thing we talk about. The insurance kept going up, but it was one of those things you had to be with them for 5 years before they'd pay for the lady to have a baby. Don't even get me, that was back in the old days. A lot of stuff's come in. Well, I had been in that program for 5 years. So if I exited, I would also have to time pay. It was at then, it was like 20 something grand to have a kid. And I couldn't do that. I didn't have the money. I'd lose my house, little bitty house I had built.
Jeez.
That was $450 a month back then. And so what happens then, Paul keeps coming back and forth. And so Paul said, I think we're supposed to be together. And I'm going to be honest with you now, knowing Paul as well as I do. Paul saw himself in me. And here's another pen I'm going to go ahead and tell you. When you meet somebody that you connect with, whether like when I met with you, Gabe, first time I ever met you, when you meet people and you have that connection that you feel both of you inside, what that is that's your soul communicating with the other soul. And it says, hey, he's been through some tough shit too. She's been through some tough shit too. You can see it in people's eyes, and you can tell it by the way they act. And Paul Thompson, with truth be known, saw me in him. He saw him because many people that are super, super successful, and all the ones I know who are real and genuine, and they do the right shit when nobody's watching them. Those are the people. And those people you're supposed to be with. And that's how you connect. And he connected, he saw somebody had something to prove. Somebody had never had a chance, but given an opportunity, they can change the world. Steve Jobs had it right with the Misfits. When you put them together, Paul was amazing and is amazing at finding people and finding that in people. And I felt it in him. And so he ended up giving me a salary over half what I told you I was making. And I always told everybody, Paul Thompson's such a good sales guy. He convinced me to leave my job and come to work there for over half of what I was making. But I made the most money I ever made in those 10 years. And I had and still have the best mentor you could ever ask for in life or in business. And that's Paul Thompson. He's the founder. He's still over TI. So I got so many stories and stuff for him. But what happened as companies grow, Gabe, and you start bringing new people in, and you start divvying it out to other people, or you start bringing investors in, you start selling stuff, that's when companies and cultures change. And that's not a reflection on TI or anybody. I'm telling you, I've learned this at many for the rest of my career, I'll tell you. It changes things. and you start getting bigger. That's when everything you got to be dressed up. Remember back when I was in it, I had to wear a suit, tie. You got to be high and tight, clean shaven. Buddy, when I was Rocket Express, I started growing a mustache. We showed up at the meeting. I had a shave kit in my seat with a note that says, get upstairs and shave or you don't have a job. That's the real shit that goes on. So that's why my
Yeah.
tattoos, which I actually have Reconex tattooed right here, and that's a whole nother story. And it's got nothing to do with logistics. It's got to do with our family, which is my family, because I don't have any
Yeah.
family outside of my wife and kids. Every family member I have, I get to choose. People say, oh, no, don't feel bad for me, buddy. I see the shit people with families got to deal with. I get to pick mine and I get to choose them. And so that's what I
Yeah.
have at Reconex. And so as companies start growing, TI started growing, I figured out that I get real passionate about being the underdog. I get real passionate about helping other people that all the chips are against them and they tell it can't be done. I've been told when I was at Fort Air, I was told I would never make it past a dock worker. Never. I've been told my
Mm.
whole life, Gabe, that it can't be done, and I'm definitely not the guy to do it. I've been told that my whole life. And so when you meet people that's been told, I get passionate in startups because why I love growth and why I love helping companies grow, and that's how I got into it, is the fun, the excitement, and changing people's lives. Because at that point, you're not just being successful, you're being significant, babe. You're being significant. You're doing
Oh, I love
something
that.
that nobody else is doing. Anybody can talk with logistics. Anybody knows freight. That's why I tell people, look, Reconics, yeah, Reconics, we can help a lot of people. But freight's just a piece. I want to work with people that we're going to do great
Always.
things together, that I can help you out, that when you need something, you call me 24/7 on my cell phone. You text me. I don't care if you run a company or not. We all the same. We all bleed red. We all have struggles. And buddy, there's shit coming at us all day, every day. The more people like you and me we can surround ourselves with and get through this together, like when I was in South Africa, my favorite African proverb, babe, is if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And so this is,
I like that. So that's 2 proverbs now, 2 quotes. You had you wanna be more than just
yes,
successful, you wanna be
yes,
significant. And then if you wanna go fast, go alone. If you wanna go
yes.
far, go together. So I said this early in the episode, and I'm gonna say it again now. I'm gonna call them Fainisms. I think I'm gonna coin that at Rocket as
Fainism.
Fainisms because you have a way of putting together your thoughts, right? And so a lot of people are smart, and Todd Fain is smart, and that's objective. Everybody who's met him would know that. But and a lot of people are good at sales, and Todd Fain's good at sales, but not that many people, in fact, very few, are able to articulate a message and have it simplified as they speak it. And I think that's your superpower. You can take a complex topic and simplify it into a proverb or a quote, and you have real impact and sincerity with it. But if I was going to ever, if I ever was describing Todd Fain, that's like how I think of it. Like you were at TI, you're the president of Reconex, you were a sales agent, and you came from nothing. And I didn't, I put a pin in this earlier. It's uncomfortable for me to talk about you, I can tell. But you say nice things about others, so here I am. You 2 things. One, you should have a tattoo of a chip because it sounds like maybe if you have a chip on your shoulder, that you do better, and you say, "Hey, if you tell me I can't, I'll show you how I will." That's a positive that you've been able to turn a negative into a positive. But I think it's because you said it earlier about your family. You said I didn't have a family, so I get to choose it, and you
Oh
turned a
yeah.
negative into a positive. But I mean, just speaking clearly, it's just a negative. You not having a family was a negative, and you were able to make it despite, not because of. And now you've turned it into like the way that you kind of set the world on fire is you take negatives and you turn them into your
Well,
strengths. So that's
that's a
just my
great
observation, but it's
observation. I'm
really
glad you
interesting.
pointed out because I want to unpack that a little bit. What you're seeing, and it's not me, it's not a negative. And I used to really think it was, Gabe. And on the surface, I understand how what I said is a negative, but let me tell
Yeah.
you why. And I'm going to unpack this a little bit. I was the age I am right now with this beard before I understood what God's sovereignty is. I never understood that. I really didn't. I'm not the smartest. I
Yeah.
don't like to read books. I read because I want to get better, but I don't like the big words. I don't like the fancy talk. And that doesn't mean it's negative. It just means it
Yeah.
must be over my head. I just want to talk simple and the way everybody believes. And so for many, many years of my life, part of my drive was bad shit that had happened to me. And I saw how successful people got treated. And I saw how people with money got to get what they want. I saw all that stuff and nobody gave me anything. And I just had to go make it happen. And I would always have that drive for the bad shit with the kids. Why did it happen with me? And why was I the guy? Why don't I know my parents? Where did I come from? Why does why does every
Yeah.
person I know, they got a family, stuff like that. And what was really
Yeah.
cool when I was a real little kid is an Baptist church, just being down here, Southern Baptist Church. And I believe men and women create religion. I believe there is a God, but I don't get caught up in the dominations and all that stuff. What I would tell you is I would be mad at God and say, if you such a God, why did you let this happen? I don't believe this shit. I question God. I don't believe it. I'm probably like every other person. I got into it, got out of it. You hang out with people. But what I experienced continuation through my entire life were these examples and the feeling that I have figured out that most people in the world don't know. And that's what God's love actually feels like. Because as you're going through
Powerful.
this kind of stuff, when you're going through shit, buddy, that I'm just not going to describe on LinkedIn because a good friend of mine said they don't deserve it. That's what he told me because I was like, hey, I'm getting to a point in life where I can talk about anything. He said they don't deserve it. But when you go through those things, you only have one person to talk to, and that's God, whether you believe in them or not. There ain't nobody coming. They ain't nobody helping. Ask all the people around here in South Carolina and Georgia and North Carolina that just got hit with the hurricane. Ask the people in Florida that gets hit with the hurricanes. We all watch TV. I've done the same, buddy. No, and life goes on, but nobody's coming. And so when you have to trust and believe in something, and
Yeah.
people say, well, Todd, are you some big religious fanatic? No, I believe in God. I cuss, I have a good time, I drink and do all the things. And I would tell you what I have figured out from that. So late in my life, I understood, Gabe, that all those negative things is what God's sovereignty is. God's sovereignty is I was there with you, I was protecting you, and you wasn't doing it alone because
Wow.
you had to go through that to get to this point for me to talk to you about it and to be who I am. So everything that I am, just like Gabe is, and any person that you bring on here, they're a
Yeah.
culmination of their experiences. And the worse and harder they are, those are the things that make the roots of a tree grow deep and you can sustain anything. That's why I don't get upset. That's why I don't get worried because you can't change anything. But I understood that. And now the reason I speak, and I've always spoke that way, and it's God given. And I'll be honest with you, I have always prayed before every meeting. I pray before every meeting. And there's guys that people know that. There's some
That's
people know it.
awesome.
Some people probably never knew that, but I pray a lot. I pray all the time. I'm the worst Christian in the world. Another reason why I want you to know that is God will, if he does and takes care of me through the shit I've been through, buddy, anybody can do it. If he loves Todd Fain, he's going to love anybody. It's open. Okay. And it's open. And that doesn't mean it's always good because you still go through bad shit. Suffrage. There's a lot of us have suffered. There's a lot of people suffered. The Jews have suffered. The blacks have suffered. The whites have suffered. The women have suffered. Everybody suffers. There's one person we need to go to help us fix it out and how to carry on. And so what happened, Gabe, is I've always tried to understand the Bible. And I'm not one of these, I can bring 100 people on here and they know the Bible like experts can tell you things, and I don't know that.
Theologist. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I know that I've experienced God's love thousands of times. I could tell you thousands of stories and it will blow your mind. And that's what people need to know. And what I feel like, and most people, the way I communicate is on a third grade level. I'm gonna be honest with you. I read on a third grade level. I talk on a third grade level. I communicate on a third grade level because what I found, it was very hard, even if you grew up reading the Bible and whether you believe in God or regardless what denomination or religion you have a book or something. Most of that stuff's written in things that nobody's scared to say anything. They don't understand what it means. And so if you think
Yeah.
about that, people that can't see or can't hear in sign language, they had to come up with a Bible because they got to spread God's word, right? In essence, that's what you and I do for Reconex and Rocket. We're spreading the word. People don't know about it. And so that's what God wants to happen. And so in order for people in prisons or people to have a second grade education or they sign language and can't read, they had to make an easy to read version Bible. Okay. And it's written on a third grade level.
I didn't even
It's
think of
written on
that.
a third grade level, and I love it. And I share that with people because it's easier to understand and you can see how God loves in your life. And so, how I'm able to take the negatives and turn them, I know that I'm following a plan. And I don't talk a lot about this, Gabe. You will hear me say things happen for a reason. You meet people for a reason. Understand my
Yes.
success of anything I do with people has been because God's allowed and put me in positions with all the right people that's been there for me. And those are the people that I call family. And so as I went through my career, and it was feeling less like a family at TI. I wanted to go work for myself, and I was going to start, and I started Shipper's Guardian. I was going to go into the shipper and tell them how they can do it themselves without you, me, or any other 3PLs and save a ton of money. That's actually when I met my
Yeah.
good brother, Lance Healy. And here's another guy.
Lance is going to
Is
be
he
on
going to
next
be
week.
on? That is so awesome, brother.
Yeah, we just
That is so
scheduled it.
awesome. Now, let me tell you about Lance Healy. I strive to be like him. And just about every person I'm going to tell you, I strive to be like them because they won't get on here and talk about themselves. And you baited me to come and talk about me because I wouldn't have come up because it makes me nervous. I know
I
I don't like
appreciate it.
it. And people
I
think it
appreciate it.
because I'm always up in front, but I don't like to talk about myself. I do like to talk and have fun, make people smile. But when,
Yeah, I could tell when I was talking about you and saying nice things, it was
yeah,
uncomfortable for you. And I actually think that's a measure of a good
oh,
intention,
well,
good
thank
natured
you.
person is if they feel a little
Yeah.
uncomfortable when people heap
Well,
praise
it
on them.
embarrassed.
If people are too comfortable with that, they kind of like it. And everybody likes to be talked highly of, but there should be a level of discomfort that also could be a Midwest and a Southern thing.
It could
That could
be,
just be
yeah.
like, oh, that's
It,
just
it really
in the
it
Midwest, we don't talk
embarrasses
about it.
me because I know there's a lot better people. So anyway, so I meet Lance Healy. So start Shipper's Guardian. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna put a TMS in, and I'm gonna teach them how to do it themselves. And
Yep.
so growing up using Mercury Gate, I knew Monica, Warren Patterson, and I worked together at M33. But I got so many stories, and I want to take up all day. We'll make another.
Oh
But
man.
what happened is, as you're looking at that, as we're going up through here, I said, I want to just work. I had been in the industry long enough because Transportation Insights, a shipper's agent, they make their money from shippers. But back when I was there and stuff I'm talking about, I hadn't been at these places. So I don't know what the business models are
Yeah.
now, but it was a gain share at Transportation Insight. It was LMI was a carrier agent. And the two differences where I am
Yeah.
then
Two separate
is
models
I
there.
don't
Yeah.
like the carrier agent model because I think it's a conflict of interest because how can you save the shipper the most money when you're getting paid by the carrier you're putting in? It's weird to me. We can unpack that.
Yeah, and then how could I think that part of this, and you know, my whole goal with the podcast is to learn and hear
Hmm.
great stories like this. And the reason I chose you, you're the first guest that
Oh,
I'm
wow.
recording an episode with because I know you tell the best stories that there is. And you've told them to me at a bar and you've told them to me in offices, but I was like, this has got to be
Well,
on a
thank you.
platform. But if we've talked just lightly about the industry, you said it perfectly,
Hmm.
conflict of interest,
Yes.
right? And so there's a lot of platforms out there today that have a clear
Right.
conflict of interest. There's 3PLs, there's TMSs, there's carrier agent programs, there's carriers who are brokering to other carriers through different technology. Technology, everyone thought it would democratize the access and everything would kind of go down to the middle. And people are people and they find a way to make money and have conflicts of interest anyways. But if you drill down into the carrier agent model, That maybe still exists today. I'm not that knowledgeable of it, but the TMS model has
Hmm.
mimicked it. And so there's a lot of TMS platforms that they offer a free TMS or like a very
Hmm.
cheap TMS, and they monetize from the carriers. There's two big ones that I can think of. But if they monetize from the carriers, then it limits how many carriers get to go in there and who can bring their rates in. And if somebody could bring their own pre-negotiated or if they have to use those ones, etc., that's not
No,
good
it's
for the
not.
shipper. So let's segue back to Shipper's Guardian. What was your intention with Shipper's Guardian? If you were going to go take your tricks of the trade and say, hey, I'm going to bring this to the shipper, you're going to make yours, but they're going to save
Oh yeah.
much more. That's, I'm
Oh
assuming, what
yeah.
the premise
So
is.
that's perfect. And I will tell you, my shipper's guardian was going in to tell the shipper everything I'm telling you, everything I'm putting on LinkedIn. I'm going to tell
Yeah.
you the real stuff. I'm going to cut through the bullshit because you hit it exactly right, Gabe. The TMSs, the technologies, there are carrier agents getting paid a commission from the carrier that they put in there is a conflict of interest. If I'm getting paid by the person I'm telling you to use, and if you're wanting to use, or if there's a carrier that's a better fit for you and they don't pay this person commissions, you don't have access to it. That sounds a little bit like the mafia to me. A
A
little
little
bit.
bit. And then if you dress that up with window dressing and say free TMS API connection and it's just your TMS, and then actually how you monetize on the back end is from how much they ship with XYZ carrier and you get that
Right.
6-7% rebate. That's not, I mean, I'm not throwing stones. I'd be throwing stones through a glass house if I was going to say, hey, I know everything and I never make mistakes and I always have the best business model and I'm the most ethical person alive. But some things are
Some things
obvious.
are same.
And that's
That's
an
an
obvious one in
obvious.
the
Think about
industry.
this, Gabe. Not only do they do that, then what happens when the shipper starts using carriers outside their system? They send their sales team in to convince them. I can tell you all the stories on why you should be using this carrier over here. They will tell you all the reasons, but the real reason is to get the freight back on the carrier that's paying them commissions because now you're not a profitable account. It's just like the mafia, and we're going to be open and honest. I'm not trying to mess anybody's business models up or anything, but there's better things, and those people still exist today. The carrier agent model's still out there.
Yeah, through
Through
TMS and
both.
through
You're
actual carrier
exactly
agent
right.
model. I think a TMS is I would actually call a carrier agent model is one way to do business. I wouldn't do it that way. But doing a TMS to hide the carrier agent model, I just
It's
think is
not
not that
ethical.
ethical.
It's under the
I think
table.
it's a bad
Hey, I
business
would like
practice.
to invite.
Yeah, you don't know what's
Here's your
happening.
first dead giveaway, shippers. And Gabe would like to invite, and I'll be glad to enjoy it, any 3PL wants to come on and talk about a free, if you got a real free in TMS, because everybody should know there's nothing in this world free. Can we all agree that?
Especially
Especially
technology.
technology.
Uh,
What's your one of your top three largest spends in your company? I bet it's tech, right?
oh
Tech and
yeah.
people.
I mean, when I Rocket, we're trying to build new tech
It's
all the
expensive.
time, and so it's and we're not funded. And I think that we can
We're
get into
not
that in a
funded
different
either, and I'm
conversation.
going to tell you, I'm dead against it.
Yeah,
So I
so
don't
I
know.
think that that's like a
You
whole
go
other
ahead.
thing. Maybe I'll just say it. So there's a bunch of companies out there, like you said, this is the red flag, free TMS. It's never free. So how could it be free? Well, it's either a carrier agent model, it's in and it's hiding, or it's VC funded and they don't have to make money and they're just going to flip it and sell it. And there's so much VC funded companies in this industry that aren't real, that aren't providing any incremental value, and they're building bells and whistles for no one that no one asked for. And I don't ever take joy in a business failing because I've started a
Right.
business and I've failed in two of my businesses. Rocket is my third, right? And I failed twice.
Me too.
I started an e-commerce furniture company and it was a total failure and I lost so much money. I started a truckload brokerage and it was a total failure and I lost so much money. And Rocket shipping is not a total failure after 4 years. And I still lost so much money in the last 4 years as I've been trying to build it, but we're now profitable and it works. And I I wake up every morning and I
Right.
want to do more of it and I really enjoy this mission. So I would never judge anybody
Right.
for failing in a business, but I can at least cast judgment on the VC model of injecting money into businesses in the freight logistics space in the last 4 years that were never going to be successful. And if a business isn't profitable, you said it earlier, it was business isn't hard. How much cash comes in, how much cash goes out, you live on what's left over. And then it actually is, it's
Yes.
simple and difficult. But when you flip that model and you go by the rule of 40, And, there's several people in the industry who I would love to have on, and I'll invite them on to
Yes.
debate this model because I've posted this on Twitter and they come at me and they're like, no, no, no. Rule of 40, negative
Right.
CAC, all these things. It's amazing and it's a great business model.
Right.
I disagree, but we
Right.
can disagree and have
That's
an open
right.
forum. I'd
Yes.
love to
And we
invite
don't
them
have
on.
to be mad. We can still
But if you,
believe in what we
yeah,
believe. You're hitting it on the spot, though.
exactly.
You're dead on.
But then there just was such a bloat of companies. And the reason I have a disdain for it is because companies like Rocket or Reconex or others who are not funded have to
Yes.
make a profit and have to
Right.
charge a fair price. It does put a ton of pressure, downward pressure on those companies to grow through this market when others can
Right.
offer it for free. And so one of the stories I always tell is I'm from northern Minnesota and I live in Fargo, North Dakota now. And I've been doing this for 4 years and I've sold to all kinds of deals, enterprise, Fortune 100 companies, all the way down to they shipped their first e-commerce order with us, and we taught them where to buy a pallet from, and that you can ship it to a residence curbside. And so I've done the spectrum, and I prefer the SMB because I think we add
Mhm.
the most value there. And enterprise, we have some tech that works now too, but I've never had success selling local, and I just couldn't understand it. Like, I'm a
Ugh.
great salesman, and I'm not afraid to say that because I've proven that, and I love sales, and I'm great at that. And I had this local account in northern Minnesota. I'm from the hometown, and they will not use my TMS, and they will not give me the time of day. I've gone in there several times. We've pitched them, and they're using one of the big box free TMSs. And they said, "Why would you charge this when we can do it for free?" And my grandpa knows the founder of the company, and I still couldn't get the dang deal. So it does grind my gears when I know I'm offering more value, but
Right.
I can't do it for free. And there's companies out there that never make a profit, that are looking to IPO that never could, and they're taking
Right.
customers like that and doing it for free. So I just don't like that
I
part
don't
of it.
like it at all. And that's the problem with the carrier agent TMS and the 3PL model. It's still about making money. And we'll get into that. Now, if you look at
Mhm.
the gain share model, okay. And look, anything I say,
Mhm.
if somebody disagrees, I'm good. Just like on my post, if you got a better way, I'm all ears
Yeah.
and I'll say, hey, that is a better way. Thank you for telling me because I'm learning the rest of my life until I'm the oldest man in the world. It doesn't matter. You still learn from everybody else, regardless of age, where you come from. So I'm sure there's a better way. But what I don't like about the gain share model is the flip of the carrier agent model, where how long does a shipper have to pay you for past sins? Because they don't understand how to negotiate LTL or truckload, and they don't understand that's a whole 15 episodes of LTL pricing. They don't understand all of that
Oh
stuff.
my
They supposed to pay you $500,000 a year just because they were paying, 5 million. They didn't need to be paying about 1 million. They don't know that. Oh, they saying, oh, you're saving me money. You saving me money. You saving me money. And it's like over time in both of those models, and I've been in both. What I also, we hadn't got to, Gabe,
Yeah.
the shipper's guardian quickly got shifted from helping the shippers. The rest of my career in many positions, I was under shipper's guardian as a consultant, but I went in to look at their books and help them grow to get their companies ready to sell. And I did that and was very successful with them. And so as you see that kind of stuff and you see the money and you see the books and you see how all these different things work, so a shipper may say, how do I know? Unless you're working with a company that is 100% transparent, and people throw that word around or not, unless they are willing to tell you
Yeah.
exactly and show it to you, this is what I make and understand, because they go in and take advantage of people. I've had rate resellers go into my customers and tell them they can save them all this money. And I tell them, you tell them,
Yeah.
I'll send them the data. They going to send me the stuff, and every one of them come back in and they'll be always higher because they're using blanket pricing. What happens is
Yeah.
a shipper's just like you and I. They didn't hit their numbers. They're trying to find money everywhere, and they got some Yahoo telling them stuff that they don't know anything about, that they can save them money, give them free TMS. And then when I explain it to them, and this is why you got to deal with business owners, buddy. When you explain to them, here's why they're saying it, here's what the numbers are, they're 20 something percent higher than what you think you're doing now. They're also going to put into carriers because the shipper got them to say it's going to be central and a couple others. I'm not going to pick on carriers. And since I said Central's name, they are getting much better in the places where they're going. So we can talk about carriers another time too.
Yeah, I think I think it's fair to use Central's name as
Yeah,
a
as an
analogy,
analogy.
because I
I
think
think
people
people
understand that
understand.
Central Transport's reputation precedes them, but I always give room to Roadrunner, to
Oh
Central
yeah,
Transport, to Frontline Freight, to
that's right.
Clear Lane Freight. I'll give room for them to improve
Yes,
because they're
yes,
businesses that can improve, and Roadrunner's doing the middle seat
yes.
CEO and redoing everything, and they've got less cost, and maybe they're getting better on transit. I see Roadrunner sometimes with like 4-day transits, and I'm like, wait a
Mhm.
minute. I grew up in the 10 days. Is this real? So I always give
Oh
room
yeah.
for carriers to
Mhm.
improve. But to use Central as an analogy, yes, that's a lot of brokers, 3PLs will come in and bid with cheap carriers when they're going against carriers that are maybe higher
That's right.
quality at the time.
And you said it perfectly.
And
See, that's why I need like people like you around, Gabe, because I'll say something, people like, oh, he's Central. No, Central's getting better. Case in point, Old Dominion. And I love Old Dominion and Todd Poland. I know Todd Poland, he's great. But I'm gonna
hey,
tell you
Tom,
back in the early 90s, when I was in it, Old Dominion was the biggest catfish carrier around. If you want to put in a cheap carrier that tore your shit up, never got where it's going, you put in Old Dominion. That's the facts, Jack.
hey, now you're talking my age. So, I was born in 1993.
When you
So
were
when I was
growing up,
growing up
Old
in high
Dominion
school and
wasn't
college,
good.
there was yeah, Old Dominion wasn't good, and Catfish, that made sense to me
Catfish
because
carriers.
when you say catfish, there was an MTV show called
Oh,
Catfished, and, like, people would meet online, and they look all beautiful, and then it turns out maybe they weren't the same person, maybe not even the same gender when they meet
see,
in
you
person,
know why
and they're
that's
like, "Oh, that
funny?
was a
I
fake
didn't even
online
know about that
profile."
show. When I said catfish, that's a bottom feeder. We go catfishing down here in the South. You know, the big catfish.
Well, I think the
It still
analogy
works
still
both
works,
ways. See,
bottom
it's all
feeder,
Todd.
but what I think the analogy you used was they were a bottom feeder, but what I was going for is they're gonna offer you something on the front end that then
Right.
they're gonna have a $200 billing variance on the back, or it's gonna arrive damaged and you got catfished. It looked great. You met the real thing and
Right.
oof,
So that's a
maybe not.
Cinderella story of a carrier can change and get much better. But it is my job and your job to the shippers to be very objective with 100% accurate data. And I can tell you who the best carriers are when it comes to service, missed pickups, damages, things like that. And so
Well, you
yeah,
guys
because we
track that,
track
so
that. And
yeah.
so what Shippers Guardian turned into was helping other 3PLs. So I've had the privilege to work with and see some of the best 3PLs out there, the people and the whole 9 yards, which ended up, remember I told you Lance Healy, and I could do a whole show with Lance Healy. I think you need to invite me back one day.
I
We
think I
gotta
gotta have both
we
of you
got
on
some
at the same
stuff
time.
because
We'll just have a
there's a
round
whole
table.
story when he and I were together. But I love him. He's a family member. Okay, he's a brother. When I say brother, and sometimes now I think it gets offensive. I don't mean to. When I'm calling somebody brother, you my brother. That means I'm gonna be in the foxhole with you.
Yeah.
I trust you, you trust me, and even when the hard shit happens, we're gonna still be together, and we're gonna help each other out in life too, because that's how we go far together. You got to pick those people and surround yourself.
Mhm.
And so, when Lance, you take a Lance that comes in here, and as he's looking, and as we started getting with technology, that's how I met him. And then Lance had this idea 20 years ago. He can tell you exact, but it was intelligent and dynamic pricing. All this stuff you hear today in our industry that came from Lance Healy, buddy. And I'm gonna be to tell you, do you know
I think
Jet McCandless? He was at Carrier Connect and all that stuff. He learned how to do his stuff because he worked with Lance. I'm just gonna be honest with you. And I'm not,
See, this is where no other place can you say
hey,
things like that. I've
yeah.
heard those stories, and I would invite
Yeah, I'd
Jed
love to
on if he
talk
would
with Jet.
ever. I
I
know
like
Jed's a
his
really
hairdo,
big
buddy.
deal.
I think if I could
Uh,
grow hair, I'd have me a down ponytail too, just so I could look cool.
but I hear these stories, and I know Lance personally as well. I've
Mhm,
met him in several conferences, but I've had nights out
mhm.
with Lance, and you don't know Lance until he's played the
And the
bongos,
harmonica.
and then
Yes,
you
he's
know
a great
Lance. But
musician. And he
and
can
the
speak
harmonica,
Swahili.
I think the harmonica I think the harmonica is like a second layer, but if you've seen him play
Oh
bongos,
yeah,
then you
yeah,
really know him because the harmonica is a
yeah.
bit more mobile. He can do that at a conference, but bongo
He plays
drum,
many he plays
Lance,
he
that's a different
plays
level.
many instruments, and I'll tell you, he's the salt of the earth guy, and he's honest. If you meet
He
him,
is.
you know what I'm talking about. You'll love people gonna love Lance Healy, but Lance, I have become real good friends with Lance, and I just love people. I love hanging out with them. I love drinking with them. I love,
Yeah.
eating whatever they eat, whatever they do. I just enjoy being part of their life. And Lance and his wife, Mary Beth, and their two children, they have a son and a daughter, some of the greatest people you ever see and ever meet. And I love them to death. But Lance had this idea. And so my gig was coming up Transportation Impact. That's different than Insight. They're a small package company, but I'm going to jump over them. We can talk about them another time. But how I met Lance, because I want to get to how I met Reconex. how I met Lance. We had known each other, and my gig was coming up. Lance said, "Hey, I've been wanting to do this intelligent dynamic pricing." He told me about it. I said, "Dude, that is genius." He said, "But I don't know all the executives at all the LTL carriers." Well, guess what, Gabe? Through all this shit I've been doing, I have met these guys, and I got stories about Estes and Southeastern and Old Dominion,
The SMC3
SMC3 conferences. I
conferences.
got stuff. I'm telling you, we got 10 years. You keep inviting me back. We can talk about whatever, and we get more to the industry once we get this piece over with. And so what happened is Lance said, "I don't know anybody." I said, "I know them all, brother." And so Lance and Jim had took on money at Banyan, and I'll let him tell you that if he wants to. I hope
I
he
hope he
does.
does. That's why I'm bringing him
And
on. I
I'm
hope he
sure
does.
I know Lance, so I hope he does, and I hope he tells you how he feel. And he's a transparent guy, so he will, long as he's not contractually obligated. I'm sure. I'm not.
I don't think
Nobody's
he is
got
anymore.
anything on
They
me.
started
You
a
can
new company
ask
now.
me anything, I'm gonna shoot you straight. So what happened is I said, "I'd love to do that, Lance." And you know why I wanted to do that, Gabe? Because it was making a difference. I created a little picture of Orville and Wilbur Wright with me and Lance's head on it. And we started going around teaching the LTL carriers intelligent and dynamic pricing. And that exists today because of Lance Healy. During that time, I was at
Yeah.
a TIA event talking about it, doing my thing, talking about why this needs to happen, why it works. This is before all the big guys on LinkedIn that are freak experts come out, and telling them why they do it. And after the show, this guy comes walking up to me, Hank Newman. I mean, he's a damn bull, son. He's got muscles and stuff. You've seen him, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's natural because I don't
Oh
know if he
yeah.
does a lot of weightlifting, but he's a baseball player. I ain't talking about soft, slow pitch softball. I'm talking about smoke your ass 90-mile-an-hour pitches. He could probably can't do that now, but he used to. Okay. Played football at John Carroll, baseball. His whole family's got 6 kids. His sons play baseball. We got a regulation pitching cage in our office. You've seen that, right? And so he comes walking up. He's probably, he's like, "Hey," and if you met Hank, I always joke, I love him to death, but he's one of those people that I say they got that grumpy, rusting face. They don't know they look
He's
grumpy.
got that
Yeah, I
scowl.
mean, he
Yeah.
looks,
And
and
if
he
he wears
wears
the
the
hat, then
hat,
it
and
kind
he
of
just
hides
looks
the
like he could whoop
shadow.
my ass in any second. You know what I'm saying? So he comes up to me
Yeah.
and he introduced himself. He said, "I'm Hank Newman." He said, "I don't know if you know this, but I was Banyan's first customer." And I was like, "Oh shit. This guy's this."
I don't think
But
I knew that.
yeah. And I'm gonna tell you, and he knew Jim and Lance, and he started talking, saying I know him. And in my mind, I'm like, "Oh Lord, Lance done messed this guy up," because I'd never heard of, at the time, Recon Logistics. I'd never heard of Recon. And this guy thinks I'm actually come up, I'm part of Banyan. He's probably gonna take his frustrations out on me. And I'm like, "Really?" And there was people standing there, and he said, "Yeah." He said, "I've heard a lot of people talk, and I thought I knew about everything there is in freight until I met you and heard you talk, and I think you're the guy." Well, good Lord, son, that made me so humble and humiliated. And look, and I say that even more now by telling you that story, by being here this many years with Hank Newman, that I should have been even more humbled. He's one of the smartest people you'll ever meet when it comes to freight, analytics, transparency, knowing this industry inside and out. And people have never heard of him because he's not going to get on and say stuff. I do that. That's what I do. But when he says very little, but when he says means a lot. He's a guy you should have on here. It probably won't go about 15 minutes, but you should have him because he's got some stuff.
It'd
It'll
be
be very
impactful.
impactful. And so Hank said, "Look, I started this company in 2005. And look, Hank didn't come from tons of money either. I mean, he started it in the basement of Ray's house, which is his brother-in-law, with a phone. We got that phone in our office, that a replica, because he threw the other one out and broke it. That's another long story when they were getting started. You've probably had those. You've had those frustrations starting your company. So what happened is he said,
Uh,
we're get we've grown by word of mouth and just people I know. And it was a smaller company at the time. I think it was 25, 30 people. And he said, "But what really keeps me up at night is, I'm kind of introverted. I don't even like being out here talking. I don't like being the center of attention. But what I do care the most about is my people at my company." And he said, I know from running a business, the only way I can ensure taking care of them and making sure they can live their lives to the fullest is if I start growing and we start making more money. So, what I want to talk with you about, are you working at Banyan? And I said, no, no, no. I said, I'm a contractor, but you know what I'm saying? He said, would you
Yeah.
consider looking at my company and helping me start a sales engine or teaching me how I can grow it so I can take care of my people? And I said, giddy up, baby. That's what I do. That's all I've been doing for 32 years is growing and helping people make
Yeah.
$1 billion. But what I found during that time is the people that do most of the work, I would tell you, count the number of people on your team and about the top eight's doing all the work. Not that everybody else isn't doing work because everybody's important. But I've watched all these people make billions
Yeah.
of dollars, Gabe, and the people that helped them get there didn't get a penny. They still making peanuts.
You know, I'll even like interject there. I was talking to the marketing team earlier today, and the analogy came up of like, oh yeah, this person's actually better at their job than this person who had this experience. And I said, well, that's because
Mhm.
they're humans. I was like, have you ever been to a doctor and felt like they really figured something out for you, and then you've been to a different doctor and it was a terrible
Mhm.
experience? And I was like, we just say, oh, if they've made it to this level, they are XYZ. And I'm like, oh, no, no. Some people are way
Uh,
better at their job than other people. And if we bring that back down to business, my previous stop, I don't talk about it much, but I
you
will
got
on
to,
this show
you
these days,
promise.
'cause because I'm not legally obligated not to anymore. But my previous stop, I was the top sales rep after 2 years, and it was, there was 100 agents there, and there was a bunch of direct sales reps, and I was 25, and I had gotten to be the top sales rep, and I thought, man, and I was making money, like Todd Fain back in the day, but with inflation adjusted. And I was
Why do you
making
think that
money. I was
was, Gabe? Why do you think you were the top? What made that happen?
I actually don't think about that all that often.
Now you're gonna know
And
how
I
it
have like a
feels.
completely
Well, you
different
gotta.
background.
I ask you the question.
Yeah.
Why do you think that happened? What was different about how you approached it or who you are that you didn't see out there? Because you're right. You're one of the best of the best. I saw that in you the first time we met. I'm genuinely interested. Why do you think that was? Because you don't talk about that a lot.
I think that I came from a completely different background than you. I just had like the
I
best
love that.
childhood
I
and
do
I
love
just
that.
had the greatest family and I have 4 siblings and like my life was just I always say it was just too good and like I never had to go through trauma and everybody goes through. I do like to say it this way. Everybody, the hardest thing you've ever gone through is still the hardest
That's
thing you've
right.
ever gone through, and it's all relative. It doesn't matter the
Yeah.
scale of it. If you haven't experienced anything else, that's still the hardest thing
Still
you
as
ever
bad
did.
as anybody else,
Um,
and as bad as I've been through, I know 25 people that's had worse stuff been through than I have.
yeah, and so it's all
Mhm.
on a scale, and then there's this weird thing about the human experience, and I'm 30, so I don't have the perspective yet, but what I've learned so far is that even if it's just for somebody, it might be a breakup, it might be a
Mhm.
divorce, it might be an illness, but whatever they're experiencing, their body experiences that
Yes.
trauma the same way as if someone, even though in our mind we're like, that's
Yes.
worse. But if you've not experienced worse, it's just as
Yes, it
bad as it's
is.
ever been for
Yes, it
you.
is.
And I think that's maybe why I sometimes actually pretty often I have imposter syndrome of why I'm good at sales or good at business, but I try to distill it down to like my life experience. I'm a culmination
Mhm.
of that
Yep.
experience still. But my motto I started, and it's very similar, Todd. I started that job at my previous stop, and they said, "Well, you get 30, well, 21%. Wasn't 30%. But if I had an incentive, I started at 21% commission, and I was a 1099 agent. I was a contractor, and they said, "But we don't pay you anything." And I was like, "Oh, well, I've never made any real money in my life." And I was working as a sales rep at
Okay.
Unishippers at the time, but I was an intern and I asked to be promoted. And they said, I brought on 54 customers in 1 year at Unishippers and I was
Wow.
23. So I was just
You a
starting and I
stud,
brought on
buddy.
54 customers. But here's an interesting thing. I like telling this to my sales reps now because they have to cold call and they do all this stuff. I was like, the only way I was allowed to bring on a customer was to
Yeah.
cold call them and get them to do a shipment that day on the phone. They had to book. So I did
That's
that
magic.
54 times in a year. I convinced 54 strangers to ship their freight with me off of the first cold call. I was an intern at a call center. It was an idea that Unishippers had. And then I had to hand it off to a sales rep. So my job was to just, hey, you got any freight moving today? I could quote. I'm with Unishippers. We have central transport, which is going back to that because I was just quoting the cheapest carrier, of course. And I got into the games of, they're like, well, what's your rate on this? I'm like, I'll show you mine if you show me yours, like that type of thing. Like I would even negotiate. I'd say, I'll give you my second best carrier option. And if you like that, you tell me what you paid. Now, then I'll tell you how much I can beat it by. And so I always played the games. But that's where I came from. I went and started at this new company, and that's a longer backstory. But I started at the new company, and they said, hey, we'll pay you commissions. And I was like, sweet, this is a much better deal because I was looking like you were at the book of business I brought on. I said, wait a minute. I would have. So then I went to Unishippers. I said, could I get that promotion to that? I did a bunch of revenue. They're like, no, you're too good at getting the cold calls. We need you to keep
cold
doing that.
calling sucks.
I was like, well, I bet you would like that.
We've all done it. You had to. Yeah.
Minimum. And it was a whiteboard. You had to, every day you had to mark off that you did 100 and they were recorded. So there was no way around it. So anyways, but I got to the new company and like you had said earlier, and we've gone for a while. So if you're listening still, thank you. And two, this is all going to be clipped up so we can just keep going because we'll clip it into 2-minute little.
Make little ones. That's what I was saying. Yes.
And so, yeah. So then they said, well, you're going to make 21% commission. And I was like, that's awesome. And they said, but if you get to $100,000 of gross profit a month, then you get 32%. So there's like a tiered schedule. And I said, well, I know what that'd be, $32,000 a month. That sounds like that's what I want to do. And so I said, let's start. And they're like, sweet. And I said, okay, I need a computer and I need some stuff. I'm going to need a desk. And they're like, you got to buy all that yourself. Mm-hmm. And this was before it was cool. I was working from home before it was COVID.
I know, buddy.
And so they're like, yeah, you got to buy that. And I was like, okay, but what's my like base? And they're like, nothing. When you get commission, that means you booked profit and you get 20% of it. And I was like, well, how do I pay all the bills? And my wife was pregnant. And so I quit my $40,000 a month job or $40,000 a year job, which was my first job. And I was like, I'm making real money. And this is in 2015, 16. And I went over to the new company and I didn't make any money for a while, but I made $1,000 the first month and $1,200 the second month, but my rent was $1,150. So that was tough. So my wife went and worked as a nurse and she was the breadwinner. And that was something that I was like, oh no, I got to get this figured out. And so I think what drove me, and you asked, this is a long answer, but what you asked was, why were you the best at sales? I did not know I was going to be good at sales, but I did know that if I worked 12 hours a day and I read every Jeb Blunt book, you got to go read Jeb Blunt. Fanatical Prospecting. I built my entire sales model off of that book. I got HubSpot CRM for free. I got Apollo.io. And this is like 8 years ago. So none of these tools were popular, but I just found them and I just started building out sales sequences and I was building out drips. So I was just a student, but I also did make 100 cold calls a day in my new job, just like I had been for a year at Unishippers for another 2 years. I just never stopped doing the same thing that was working. And soon enough, I had gone to a $200,000 a month gross profit book. And the reason that there's a lot of reasons why I left, but one of the reasons I left is because they kept saying, oh man, you're making too much money now. You're making too much money now. Can we redo the deal? Can we renegotiate that? Because you kind of blew that out of the water. And I said, I'll never do that with my sales reps. And I understand why they did it. I have better perspective, but still, all they would have had to do is say, hey, do you want a promotion to like director of sales? I'd have been like, amazing. That's right. And I'd still be working there today. But thank God they didn't, Todd.
That's that's what I'm talking about. That's the sovereignty, baby. That's what I'm talking about. And everybody says it differently.
I thought I thought I was getting hosed. And in reality, God was like, no.
You're just getting ready.
You're going to feel that way, but this is for a greater purpose. And now when you were talking about Hank, I identify with that entirely because I've 28 employees and all I think about is not, I want to build $100 million company, but no, I want to make enough so that everybody here stays here. And one of the things I always say at Rocket Shipping, we've been doing this for 4 years. November 3rd was when I quit at my old company. So not quite 4 years. We're recording this on Halloween. But so it's just coming up on our 4-year anniversary when I gave my notice. And one of the things I think about is that no one at Rocket has ever quit. So I have fired people and I have hired the wrong people, and I've gone through a lot of tumultuous times with, incorrect decisions that I have to own. But no one at Rocket has ever said, you know what, this isn't the place I want to work anymore. I'm going to quit. And so there's been a lot of employees who are now going to be here 3.5 years, 4 years that are still here. And that's all I think about is how do I create an environment for them to be successful? And one of the things is you got to go get revenue. And that's what I'm good at. So all I think about now is how do I keep doing the revenue and everybody else does the other stuff so that I always keep feeding the
God,
machine.
I love you, brother.
But
I
I'm going
love
to go
you.
back towards you now. I'm going to spin it back.
Spin it back real quick before we get off that, because I got one more question for you. That was perfect. I love that answer, and I love how you feel. But what I would like you to talk to, because you're on a roll right now, you said something. I had to fire some people, okay, and we all have. We all have. Can you talk for?
It's the worst thing.
Can you
about
talk
my
for a
job.
second and be real? I'm talking about be real. Be as graphic about yourself as you feel comfortable being on how that makes an owner feel. Walk through that process in your mind and in your life and when you're at home and everything. How does that make you feel when you have to let somebody go? Even if they deserve it and listen, you're the kind of guy just like the rest of I believe people fire themselves, okay? Yeah, and I know people get fired, but if you're with a good company, normally the only time the company goes out of business or you're just not doing your job or something goes down, regardless of how it is, right, wrong, or indifferent, talk about how that feels.
So I put it in 2 buckets, and I think about this all the time because my least favorite thing that I have to do is fire somebody. And I think that goes back to how I was raised, and like my upbringing was like, you just always got to do good stuff for other people. And so and I'm from the Midwest, so it's just a very uncomfortable thing to do. But if I do bring it back, my responsibility is to make sure to take care of the people, and if something's going wrong in the company and I can identify it's because of an employee, then it's actually like I got to take care of everybody, which means that I have to do this hard thing because it's hurting the rest of the company. That's my least favorite thing to do, but I put it in 2 buckets. Those that maybe just weren't right for Rocket, but are great people, right? Those are the hardest people to fire, right? But I'm going to that's easy to say. I struggle even more firing the people that deserve to be fired because I see it as a failure that I chose them. So I failed. See the difference there?
Yes, I know.
So there's one side where it's like, they just weren't, they're just not right fit, and it's kind of obvious, and it's just a hard thing to do, and you feel bad. Those should be harder because it's such a difficult. It's like, hey, you're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing, but you're just not that great at this role, and you're not fired up about this company, and the culture is fired up, and you're not, and so it didn't work. That should be the hardest thing to do, but my ego makes the other one harder to do, and I wait longer to fire people that deserve it, whether they were malicious towards the company, whether they deceived me, whether they lied about who they were, they lied about what they were doing. I've gone through a lot of that, but they're way harder to fire because I'm the one who goes out and recruits people and says, this is going to change the company, guys. And I convince all the other leaders, this is a great decision. Let's pay this person a bunch of money. And then because of my ego, I hang on to that person longer than I should have. And I lose credibility with my core people that all are telling me, hey, this is a problem. And I say, I know it's a problem, but I can fix it. It's actually, you just don't see the vision the way that I see it. And nothing makes a man feel worse than when his wife knew. And my wife works at Rocket with me, and she always has known. She's been right 100% of the time on the hires that were incorrect and hired for the wrong reason. And it was greed, or it was, I want to grow bigger, so I have to do this. And she's now 4 for 4 on 4 people at Rocket that are no longer here. She knew all 4. That's not the right decision. And I went against it. And she gives me that autonomy, of course, because I'm the CEO and we are married and we work together. But that's pretty hard to go back to the wife or back to the other leaders that trust me and say, hey, I really screwed up. I'm going to go fix it now. And so it's actually harder for me to do that because of my ego than it is to, have the other.
Well, that's compounding, right? I mean, on the one, when your wife knows, and I started Transportation Impact's freight division with my wife at our kitchen table, Michelle. And as a man and a husband, It's even as worse as a leader of a company because everybody's looking at you anyway. But in your personal life,
Yeah.
you at least want your wife to feel like you good at something. And when they get to
Yeah.
see you
I want you to be
fail,
proud
you want to
that
be
I'm good
proud.
at
You want to
this.
make each other proud. But same. Buddy, you got to have
Yeah.
Hank Newman on. He can talk through that because it's hard for anybody, all of us, when it comes to firing people. And that's a whole thing we could unpack. That's a whole show.
Yeah, I think that everybody struggles to admit when
Yeah,
they're wrong, but when you're stupid enough and smart enough to start a company, right? Because you got to have a certain level of stupid to think that you can build a business. You got to have a little bit of delusional optimism, is what I
that's
like
right.
to call it. Delusionally optimistic that it'll work. Otherwise, it won't, because you have to, even through the most difficult markets, right? It's been a difficult market or scenarios, and I've gone through those. You have to be able to think it's still going to work and not lose any enthusiasm. So that's delusion. But if it works out, it wasn't
That's right.
delusional.
It
It
turns
turns out.
out you just got to roll.
But you have to have that, and then you have to be able to, at the same time,
Yes.
temper that and say, "Oh, it's high
Right.
stakes to do this." And so, let's say I make a decision to hire the wrong person, and then I hold on to him for too long, and then I find out later that I was blind to a lot of things that were happening at the company. Whose fault is it? It's kind of mine. It's entirely mine, and it's not just like, "Oh, that's just a silly little mistake,
Hey,
Gabe."
buddy,
It's more, "Oh, that almost
it is, and
wrecked
it's
the whole thing you
always
built for
going to
3
be
years."
because everything stops at you. And what you have to remember, and I've worked with many 3PL owners and founders, and that's part of my experience. That's why I get to
Yeah.
talk to people. Here's what I know for a fact: at your stage, as you have those 25, 30 employees, and as you continue to grow, and that's what people think. Nobody gets in the business to hire a lot of people. You got to hire people because you got to have stuff done that
No,
you
no.
can't do anymore, right? That's why you pay other people. If you could
Yeah.
do it all, you couldn't. But here's what
Yeah.
happens. You can't win the game. You can go get deals. That's why I like focusing on growth and meeting people and being the face and communicating and talking about it from the mountaintop and being the person at the end of the day. If it doesn't go right, I'm the guy that's on the hook, just like you. But let
Yeah.
me tell you this: you can't win the game. You can't win the game by yourself. Your people's going to win the game, but you can always lose it by
Yeah.
yourself. You can always lose it, Gabe.
Oof, that sets in too. That's if you could describe being a founder,
Mhm.
that's what it is. You cannot win without all your people, but you can lose it all
That's
on
right.
one mistake or one compounded mistake. It's
Uh,
never one mistake. It's one mistake that you
right.
don't want to admit that compounds into a new one that compounds, and that's happened to
Cause
me.
why? You're human,
Wow.
right? That you hit it all. You're human. We're all
Turns out.
human. We make mistakes. We fail fast. You
Yeah.
hit another thing on the head. You show me a man that's or a woman that's got $1 or $1,000,000, and I'll show you that same person that lost five. So I'm just telling you, if you
Yeah.
run a
There
business
it
and
is.
you're successful at any point, you have failed a lot. I have.
Yep, that's what it is. I mean, and I think that bringing it back, we've talked a lot about people in the
Mhm.
industry, right? And so, one, we're gonna have Todd
Well,
Fain
thank
back on
I
the
was
show
hoping I'd do
because
it.
this
I
is
would.
maybe it'll just have to be a
Look, I
monthly
told
test.
Terry Setzer, I said, I'm going to set the bar pretty low. That's why I'm usually the first you asked me to do it. So that way everybody else will be better. I can just get that. But I said, I'm at least hope that I say at least one thing enough to get back because I love just talking to you. And I'd love to talk more about you, Gabe,
Yeah.
because I believe, and I've heard me say this to you, but I want everybody to know rocket ship and rocket tech. I think you guys are the future. You're a partner of ours through tech. We're a tech company, and you do a lot of things. And I'm telling you, we don't work with a lot of people in the same space. I know them all, but I'm telling you, you're the guy, you're the company, your team. You won't meet better people, and that's the people we like to do and work with. Is just real, genuine people that we both do what we say we're going to do, and when shit messes up, we get on it
Yep.
quicker than anybody. So I just wanted, I'm excited to get it come back, but I want you to know that your people and you are making a dynamic impact in the industry, and you're doing it the right way, and I'm all behind you.
Well, I appreciate that. We would never, I never would plug Rocket, but I'll take
Oh,
the
I know
endorsement
you
of a
wouldn't.
guy like
I'm
Todd
giving it to
Fain,
you.
and
Yes, I love being associated with you and your
I
company, and
appreciate
thank
that.
you for having me on today.
Yeah, and to wrap up on this episode, this, if you've listened to this whole episode, then you've gone through the ups and downs. You've heard a lot about Todd's
Well,
stories,
hopefully
but
you're
there's
gonna
so
cut
many
all
more.
that out, Gabe.
But I think
Hopefully you'll cut all that stuff out.
but what I'm hoping you hear in this episode is an arc of one, there's a lot of podcasts out there in freight that are very structured, that have a very clear focus. I don't have a clear structure or a focus. I'm just trying to have conversations with people who have done it and are doing it. And I think that that's important. That's the niche I'm trying to fill, is that there are people out there building businesses that feel alone, that don't know if they're doing it right. And there is a lot of industry fakery
Yes.
of people. And we started the episode with this, and it's going to be a theme in every show. So I'll just continue to hammer it here. There's a lot of people on LinkedIn, on social media, that have never done anything in logistics, have never been successful, but appear on the surface to be the experts. I'm trying to create a space, a podcast, a platform for the actual experts to come and talk about the industry, not to
Right,
bash
right.
it, not to speculate about truckload rates, but to just talk about
Yes.
what it is
And
to
get
build a
some
business
nuggets.
in freight
Right.
and in logistics. And, be able to, there's probably a lot of platforms that have sponsorships or anything like that, that you can't say certain things.
Right.
We can,
That's
because it's
right.
not sponsored. We're just people
That's
having
right.
conversations. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Tune into the next one, and let's talk logistics.
That's it. Thank you, Gabe.
All right.